I'm Gary Jacobs with another edition of Long Island Backstory. Our next guest, Tony Giordano, has been a good friend of mine for over 10 years. Tony has been a very successful businessman, very active in the community, active in politics, on several boards, including the 9/11 first responders, the IDA board in Suffolk County. He's a proud father of 3 children that in their own right are just amazing kids. But Tony's past career is a sports agent, a professional sports agent for 20 years. And whenever we go out, he always tries to talk about his children, his grandchildren, the 9/11 first responders. And you know what? Nobody cares. All they want to do is ask him about his years being a sports agent. So I said, Tony, let's do a story and tell everybody about being a sports agent and what it's like. So welcome to our edition of Long Island Backstory with Tony Giordano. So Tony, how does one become a sports agent?
How does one become a sports agent?
And you don't graduate school and take sports agent major in college, right?
Actually, now they do have sports management courses, but when I started in the business, it was very new. I became a sports agent by working with a sports agent. Originally, one of his players needed financial planning, and he asked me to come in and sit with his player, and then he liked how I worked, and he asked me to continue to work with his other players, and one thing led to another, and then I brought him a player to represent, and then he asked me to work with him. So I kind of fell into it. I didn't go through college to be a sports agent. Now today, it's a different story. People become sports agents. They go to college, they graduate law school, they try to get into it. It's become a very popular occupation. But in this country today, you have to be certified to be a sports agent. In other words, you can't just represent players. I think there's about, from what I remember, maybe about 250 certified agents in the whole country.
Okay.
And you got to be certified by the Baseball Players Association, so it's a very limited market, and you have very limited sports agents too. So it's not an easy road to get to, but it's well worth it.
So when you play sports, are you really into sports? When you were a kid, did you love baseball and this was your dream to do something with this?
No, I never planned on being a sports agent. I played baseball as a kid. I wasn't good. I would never had an opportunity to even play in the major leagues. But I enjoyed following the players, and when this agent came along and asked me to do some work for him, I jumped at it because I enjoyed working with baseball players from a financial standpoint.
Right. Now, I read a story in Newsday a few years ago about Mariano Rivera, who, I'm not a big baseball freak, but everybody knows his name. Tell me you discovered Mariano Rivera.
No, well, I should take the credit for that, but actually it's a really good story. I have a player, his name is Mike Jerzenbeck, and he played in the minor leagues for the Yankees. And this was in maybe 94, I can't remember exactly. And the Yankees were considering bringing up a pitcher because one of their pitchers had gotten hurt. And Mike was pitching really well as a starting pitcher in minor leagues. So we thought for sure Mike would be the one to be brought up. This was going to be his opportunity. So I called up the front office of the Yankees and I spoke to the general managers, what an agent does, just to get a feel for what they're thinking. And he said, well, we're probably going to bring up a guy named Mariano Rivera. Now, at that time, Mariano Rivera was a starting pitcher. And I said, Mariano Rivera, he's not as good as Mike Jerzenbeck. He's not even a starting pitcher. So they didn't listen to me. So they brought up Mariano Rivera over Mike. And he didn't really succeed as a starting pitcher, but he became the closer for the Yankees, and the rest is history. So I guess I want to take some credit to the fact that I was the first to tell them that Mario is not a starting pitcher.
It's a good thing they didn't listen to you.
They didn't. Well, if they would have listened to me, Mike would have been brought up in the big leagues, which is what my job was. My job was to get my player up there, not Mariano. Some guy named Mariano Rivera. I didn't even know who he was at the time. So that's how that was an interesting story among many that I've had over the years.
So what does one do as a sports agent? Is it strictly negotiating salaries, or is there, I mean, you hear stories about all these sports agents and it was glamorous life. What does one do as a sports agent?
Well, if you saw the movie Jerry Maguire.
That's you?
It could be me. I was very similar, and I watched it. It was actually very realistic.
Yeah.
A lot of sports agents were in that movie as extras. But you do contracts, but you almost become like a personal advisor to the players, especially the young players, in regards to their career, in regards to their finances, because these kids make a lot of money at an early age. And your job is to not only try to help them make this type of money, but to hold on to it, because it's a short-lived career. So, I mean, as an agent, we pretty much did everything that this player relied upon. I wouldn't say it was like a glorified babysitter, but to a certain extent, we did a lot more than what we were empowered to do in regards to these players. Help them rent cars, help them get their homes, help them when they go to spring training, rent an apartment, help them to get their equipment. I mean, you name it, I did it.
Could you ever tell them no? I mean, do you ever say, hey, you're making a mistake going with this girl or spending too much money?
Well,
I mean, you don't want to piss them off, right?
I can't tell them what woman that they would go with, but I could tell them if I felt they were spending too much money, because the plan is that this is a short-lived life. You're going to be out of baseball in several years. The opportunity to make this type of money is going to go away, and to hold on to as much as you possibly can. Now, granted, you want to enjoy yourself and spend and buy different things, but don't go overboard. I did that all the time. And they were they would listen. Whatever, and then we found that after they got married, sometimes their wives would step in.
Why would they get married? They're living the life.
Well, that's, I mean, the point is they would. Some would. I mean, Derek Jeter's the best example. He had a great career, made a lot of money, and seems to have done very well, and he stayed single. But some of these players, they have hometown girlfriends, and they met, and they're together, and they don't like being alone on the road. I don't know. I never asked them why they were getting married.
Right.
That was something I didn't.
So let's get to the meat. What is the social part of it like? I mean, do these guys go to clubs every night when they're in a new town? And if they do you go with them? And I imagine fancy dinners and famous people throwing themselves, trying to meet them. Is that really true?
No,
or?
I think that's exaggerated. I think they get to a hotel and
There's not people waiting at their rooms?
no. I've never
I'm
seen
disappointed.
that. I've never seen that. I mean, that's the Hollywood end of it.
Right, so it's not true?
A lot of them would get to their rooms, have a bite to eat. Don't forget, there's a lot of traveling in Major League Baseball. They're flying from city to city. Sometimes they'll get into a city at 2 or 3 in the morning and then have to play the next night. So most of the time they'll be relaxing in their room. Occasionally they'll go out, have a drink, have dinner, especially when they're in a nice city. But as far as I'm concerned, the players I had, I never saw this lifestyle that you're referring to. I mean, I'm sure it went on. It's just that I was never exposed to it. I mean, and as their agent, I did socialize with them when they came into town. I had dinner with them, but I kind of kept the arm's length because I didn't want to.
Did you travel with them when they went? You didn't travel with them.
No, they have a chartered plane. The teams travel together. I would occasionally go to a city to meet them there to watch them play and have dinner with them. I would see them in spring training. But I didn't want to be a part of their lives 24/7. I try, you have that advisor-client relationship. You try to keep it that way.
Now, what about the performance-enhancing drugs that are all over the place now? Was that
PEDs.
around when you were?
That's a good question. When I was an agent, PEDs were not, I didn't see them. I mean, obviously, no.
Did you know they existed?
Well, I didn't really know they existed that much. It was kind of hidden from us as agents. Maybe it was talked about occasionally, but at that time it wasn't really illegal to do.
Okay.
And
but they never asked you to get
no,
them.
no, no,
Or set them
no,
up with somebody.
no. Never in all my years that I did it was I involved in that, and not even my players in regards to that. So I really never heard of it. I heard of it after I left the business. Now, when it came out over the last 5, 6 years.
But you think they were doing it back then, or you really don't know?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that. I couldn't say yes. I couldn't say no.
Right.
I don't know.
Maybe there wasn't as much money in it, so there wasn't as much incentive to do it.
It's a very touchy situation. You don't know which players did it and which players didn't, which players didn't do it and did really well, and now the assumption is they did do it, and then it was very interesting. I had one player that was named after he retired about doing PEDs after he retired, And I remember the USA Today called me up, or ESPN, and they were asking questions. And I looked at his record, and he didn't have the greatest major league record. I said, my God, if he was doing it, he should get his money back, because it didn't help his career. No,
He should get his
didn't help
money
his
back.
career. But there was a lot of speculation. I don't know. I never firsthand saw it, and I really didn't even talk about it. The years I was doing it, I didn't talk about it too much, because we really didn't. It wasn't as in the forefront as it is now.
So you got to have some crazy stories, and I'm sure everyone asks you all the time. So give me one or two stories that stick out in your mind in the 20 years that you were an agent.
Well, my God, there's a lot of stories. I had a player, true story, a pitcher, and he was brought up in the major leagues, and he was going to pitch, and he was pitching maybe it was his first or second start in Miami to play the Miami baseball team down there. So he was with the Cardinals. So we were all excited. His family was all excited. And we all went to, in those days, cable wasn't like it is today. This was in the 90s. So we had to go to a bar where they had a satellite TV, and the game was going to be on there. So we all went to this bar, his family, his father, his mother, all his relatives. And the game's about to start, and he's not the starting pitcher. And we're like, what's wrong? Why is he not starting? I can't understand this. So his father said, you got to call. So I had to call down to the stadium, and I was able to get to the PR office. And I said, well, how come this player is not starting? And they said he never showed up for the game. He got here late.
Wow.
I said, what?
Who shows up late to their game?
For their game, a player, and he got there too late. And
they punished him?
They had to scratch him from the lineup. He wasn't ready to go out on the mound and pitch. Major League
What,
Baseball.
he oversleep?
Evidently, his aunt picked him up at the hotel and took him to the stadium, and they got lost on the way there. This is the story I heard.
It sounds like there's more to the story.
Well, that's what I heard, and that's the story I heard. So I remember sitting there, and we're all like,
That's a downer
never
of a
in my
night.
life. Yeah, never in my life did I have a Major League Baseball player be late for a game and not show up, especially a young pitcher that's coming up in the rotation.
You got to be so excited. You think
Well,
he'd be there 2 hours before.
Needless to say, he was fined by the team.
Really?
Oh, yeah, he was fined, and then we had to speak to the general manager and get that all cleared up. He had to go to the manager and apologize. The manager at the time, ironically, was Joe Torre. So,
Wow.
interesting. And normally the player would talk to the manager, and I would talk to the general manager, and that's how it worked. And I had to pick up the phone, and so that was one interesting story.
So where is this player now?
He played in the big leagues for 10 years. He had a fairly
So he did have a good career.
Yeah, he had a good career, fairly successful career. But that was a crazy story.
Did you lecture him?
Oh, yeah, we all did. It was like, this is your life.
Right.
But he had a great deal of talent, so they were difficult with him, but they didn't throw him, they didn't send him back to the minor leagues.
Any other stories?
Oh, I could sit here for hours and talk about stories. One story I always found very interesting was that when you're a player, you get a lot of access to restaurants and shows and different things like that. And I found that now when the player is, playing, it was, you can call up a restaurant or you can call up a show and you can get seats right away, or you can get private entrance, or you can get preferential treatment. And so I would call up if a player would come into New York and he said, hey, I want to go see a Broadway show. We would call the theater and say, this is player wants to see a show, and they would always have tickets for them right away. Oh, it was
I wonder if
amazing.
they do that. If they still do that today.
Well, now today, I'm sure they do. But now today, the players that are retired no longer have that treatment.
Right.
And I think
That's
the
gotta be a
biggest,
downer.
big time. Now they're just like,
Who are you?
You and I. They got to get online with everybody
Right.
else, and they've got to buy tickets. And believe it or not, leaving baseball, forget about the money, just the lifestyle, the opportunities, the access that they have no longer is there as it used to be. The first-class travel, they all fly in charter jets everywhere they go. They don't travel commercial. They have a charter jet. They have five-star hotels wherever they go. They get meal money on the road, even though they're making all this money. And suddenly they're no longer playing Major League Baseball. And now they're home living in Arkansas.
Do you help them with that adjustment, or are you done? When they're done, that's it? You never see them again?
Some agents would just, that's my business, it's gone, you need any help, go talk to your priest, go talk to your rabbi. But the thing is now, well, I would still continue talking to them, it's you develop a very close relationship with your players because you work with them on their way up in the minor leagues when they make no money and you make no money. When you're an agent and they're in the minors, you don't make a penny. So it's kind of you're making an investment in them. They could leave you anytime they want because they have a 1-year agreement. So they can make it to the big leagues and say, you know what, Tony, we decided to go another agent. We're going to make all this money now. Sorry.
Right.
So it's a lot of loyalty. So you work very hard for them. I felt very close with them because, they are young kids and they're working their way up the ladder. You live with them ups and their downs. And then when they get up to the big leagues, don't forget, they still have to stay there 3 years. So everybody thinks that once you make the majors, you make a lot of money. You have to be there 3 years.
In order to make the big money?
Yeah. The big money is really made after 3 full years in the major leagues.
Okay.
That's when the big money. And then after 5 years is the even bigger money because they have a structure called arbitration and then free agency. So for the first 3 years, they're not making a lot of money.
So you really have a big investment with these people.
Sure.
You have the first 3 years in
Plus
the minors.
their years in the minors.
and then
How
the
many
other-
years are theoretically?
about 6 years before they really start making money.
And you're working for free. You're
Wow.
working pretty much for free. And they can leave you and go to another agent.
Has that ever happened?
Sure, it happens to all agents. And it's funny because some agents know when a player is about to be is going to be on, about to be qualified to make the big money, and that's when they'll go after them. So they'll figure, let the agent work.
Do
with
all the work in the.
And then when they're ready to make the big money, they'll come over to me.
Wow.
It's a very
That's
difficult
ruthless.
business. It's ruthless. It's a difficult business. You have to accept it because you have to say, hey, that's the business we're in. You accept it. But many nights I spoke to a major agent once. In fact, he was the inspiration for the TV show Alice. I don't know if you remember the show Alice on HBO. It was a really good show. Alice was a really good show. And it was about an agent in California. And Robert Yule played the part, and he played it really good. Now, the real agent used to sit next to me at agent meetings all the time. And I said to him, what's it like, because he's very successful. He says, I wake up every morning thinking, who's going to fire me?
Oh, really? That's not a
That's
good
what he
life?
said to me. That's what you think, because you
Right.
don't know when they're going to decide to leave. They're always being tempted by other agents. It's a very, don't forget, you have about 1,000 players in the major leagues, and you have about 200 or 300 agents. So
Right.
what does that tell you? The
Right.
amount. So, and, one player would use another player to recruit. I remember one of my players was being recruited by another agent, and Cal Ripken Jr. called him.
Ah.
Cal Ripken
Well,
Jr.
he calls you, you got to pay attention, right?
Exactly. And I'm like, oh my God, Cal Ripken Jr. is calling my player.
Did he get him?
No, he never did. I worked very hard on it, and I kept him. But the point is, they do try
Right.
because it's only a 1-year agreement, and after 1 year, they have the right to renew their agreement with you or go on to another person.
So, who are some of the famous players that you represented that we may know about?
Well, we were the first agents for John Franco of the Mets. We have him. We had who else? I worked with before I became an agent. I worked for an agent when I was learning the business for Wade Boggs. I did a lot of work with him. Some of the other players that I represented was A.J. Pazinski, who's still playing today, Bronson Arroyo, who's still playing today, Dan Ugla, did a lot of work with him, he's playing today. David Ireland, who never really made it as a player, but has been a very successful coach. With the Yankees, he was the pitching coach when they won the World Series, and now he's the pitching coach for the Kansas City Royals. Wally Whitehurst, Jeff Innes, I mean, the list goes on and on. Billy Koch. So we've had a lot of players. A lot of players. Yeah, at one point I had about 15 or 16 players,
Wow, that's
25 total. 15, about almost 9, maybe 9 or 10 in the majors. And I had a little small company. I worked with Kurt Leiter, who's Mark Leiter's brother. Kurt was my bird dog. He would recruit the talent because I had no idea of how to recruit players. You have to know talent. So he would go out and recruit players in the minor leagues to see who we think we should sign. It was also word of mouth. I met a lot of players via referrals. If I did a good job for a player, they recommended another one. At one time, I had a Yankee who won 2 rings, Alan Watson. He won 99 and 2000, so it was exciting to have a player on the Yankees when they won the World Series 2 years in a row.
Are these things team specific? I mean, forgive my ignorance. Like, do you do like I only bring people to the Mets?
No.
Anybody in the league you can
represent.
And they don't get mad if you bring some. Hey,
No,
Yankees don't say what'd you give me this guy for?
No,
Why?
you don't bring the players. They pick the players. You just represent.
So you don't go. You don't sell the players.
No. Well, what happens is after 6 years of playing in the majors, you become what they call a free agent. Then you have the right to go to every team and offer your services. But for the first 6 years, no, they pick the player in the draft, and they have control of that player for 6 years, plus all the minor league years.
So all you're basically doing is negotiate. Once they pick them, then you're negotiating their salary?
Yeah, for the first 3 years, there's no negotiations at all. Whatever the team wants to pay the player, they pay. That's it. There's no negotiation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's whatever minimum is plus. After 3 years, then it becomes what they call arbitration years. From the third to like the fourth or fifth and the 6 years, the player has the right to ask for a certain amount of money. The team has a right to offer a certain amount of money. If you guys don't meet in the middle and come up with a compromise, you do what they call arbitration. You go to an arbitration hearing, and either the team gets to pay their money or you get to get your money. There's no middle. So what happens is when you know you're going to arbitration, you ask for a lot of money because you figure it's going to scare the team in case you win, and the team lowballs you because if you lose, then the player's stuck with that. So the system.
Well, who determines whether they how does
an arbitrator?
But what is based on what?
They're based on their statistics, comparables, things like that. I'll give you an example. This is a actual. Well, it's from the 90s, but this is every player that was playing in the major leagues in, let's say, 2000, year 2000. And what it does is it tells me what their contracts are, everybody, what they earn.
It's all public.
It's not public. I mean, you could find out what a player makes by Googling it, but the specifics of the
Google, probably.
Yeah, and this is the specifics of the contract. You can see there's all different incentives and bonuses. Is normally not public. So what happens is we would study these. We would know them cold. And then we would be able to go to a team and say, well, look, if you have X player making this, and my player is very comparable in statistics to him, this is what he should be making. And if the team agrees, then you don't go to arbitration. If the team doesn't agree, then you go to arbitration and you present, it's like a legal court. It's a case. And I had a sports attorney on retainer, and he would come with me, and we would present why my player should make X, using evidence of other players.
Right.
And the team would present other players that they feel why he shouldn't. And some of these arbitrations become very nasty because what we used to do is we'd have the general manager would always sit in a room. So we would have the players sit in the room with us, and I would have the players staring at the general manager. And
Trying to intimidate him?
And now here's the general manager having to talk bad about his own player in front of everybody.
Right.
And
That's not
sometimes
a
it
good
doesn't.
position to be in.
No, so the player would sit there, and the general manager would be very uncomfortable having to knock his own player who's sitting across the table.
Right.
Very interesting system. But you don't want to go there because there's no middle ground. The arbitrator either rules for you or against you.
So it's a gamble.
It's a gamble. So you try to come to some middle ground. I went to 2 arbitration cases, and I lost them both. We've lost them both. But I explained to the player, because they wanted to settle outside the arbitration room. They came to us and said, we want to settle, and this is what we're going to offer you. The union was there, and the union was, because the union's always very present. And the union was like, well, it's not near the midpoint, because normally you try to get the midpoint, what their number is, and it wasn't, but we probably should have taken it. But the player's like, hey, I'm already here. I've flown here. I'm prepared. You guys got a good case. Let's roll the dice.
Right.
Then we lost the case.
It sounds like a glamorous industry to be in, though, and a lot of fun, and you love sports. Why the heck do you get out of it?
I got after the 25 years because there was a lot of travel. The industry changed a great deal. The one-man operations like I was, the small companies, which were very, very able to at least work, changed. The salaries have exploded so highly that the big companies, the major companies, have now
That's big business.
Big business. So it's either you join a major firm, and this is my opinion, you join a major firm, or because the mom and pop shops of the past are no longer there. So what happened was I'd been doing it I started in, I did it like since early 1980s, 82, and I decided that I didn't want to travel any longer. I wanted to be home. I missed the years I was an agent. I missed seeing my kids grow up. I did. I was always on the road. You travel every week. You're always somewhere. You work 24/7. You get phone calls from these guys at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
And you wish you were still doing it?
No, I'm not, because I actually enjoy when the players come to town. I know everybody. I get to see them. I have all the benefits of working with them, of dealing with them, but not having to work with them and not worried about being fired.
So you just enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I do.
So we have 5 minutes left, and there's 3 baseballs sitting in front of us, and I'm sure each one has a story.
Yes.
So let's start with the Nolan Ryan ball.
Well,
and there's a lot of signatures on this,
Yeah,
so tell us about that ball.
This ball I'll always cherish, because what I did was every one of my players that I represented, every one, signed it. So even the guys that never even made it to the major leagues, because I had players that never made it, signed this baseball. And what originally it was signed by, if you can see on the front, I could say Pete Rose, who we all know, is very famous. And I had this ball in my office, and the first player came in, and I didn't have a ball for him to sign. So I said, just sign this ball. And then I said, now if I go out and get a new ball, I'm going to have to get a signature again.
Right.
So I just had everybody start signing. So over the years, all these players that I represented signed the baseball.
Well, that's
And
it. That's
I'll
your whole
always keep-
history is
Yeah,
right
it's
on
right
one
there,
baseball.
And I go through it sometimes, and I take a look, I remember I wonder what he's doing today, or I wonder where he's at today. So it's pretty interesting. There was one player, I tell a quick story, that is on this ball that if you take a look today, he never made it to the majors, maybe for a week. But if you take a look today, all the coaches on the sidelines, when their first base coach and the third base coach wear helmets. And the reason why they wear helmets is about 8 or 9 years ago, my former player, who is now a coach, was coaching in the minor leagues at first base, and a line drive came and hit him in the head and killed him.
Wow.
His name was Mike Coolbaugh. That was the first time in the history of baseball that anybody ever got killed on the baseball field. And because of that, that's why the coaches today will wear helmets at first base. They didn't wear helmets for a while. So I have his name on the ball here. I'll always remember him. This ball here was signed by, when I was growing up, I loved the Yankees. And now playing in baseball, representing baseball players, I got to meet everybody. And I was very businesslike. I was like an agent. I don't care if a baseball player was in the room. I acted totally business. But I loved the Yankees. This player, one day I was standing on the elevator going in Yankee Stadium, going up to see the general manager as an agent. And I saw Greg Nettles, and his name is Greg Nettles. And if you Yankee fans remember Greg Nettles, he played in the late 70s when they won their championship. So I said, Greg, I'm an agent, but I got to tell you, you're my favorite player of all time.
But you weren't representing him.
No. And I said, I hate to ask you this, but would you get me an autograph? And he signed my baseball. To this day, I have it. So that was the reason why I hold on to this is because it's the only autograph I ever asked for of any player that I ever met. I didn't ask for anybody. And I met some famous players. This final ball was given to me by one of my players because he made it to the Cardinals in the big leagues, but he never made it past like a month he was there, and he played with Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith is a Hall of Fame shortstop. Very, very, very good player. So he said, Tony, I appreciate your help getting me up there, but I don't know if I'm going to stay long and nor pay you. But I did get you an autographed baseball to you personally from Ozzie Smith.
Oh, so it wasn't even from him. He got Ozzie Smith.
Yeah, one of my players got Ozzie Smith to get the ball signed. So that was my third and final baseball.
Oh, that's great.
So I have a lot of really nice memories of it. I sit back now and I laugh at a lot of the stories that happen and where the guys are. And I still occasionally call my players, and they call me to see how I'm doing. And there's 3 players still playing in the major leagues. They're all in their late 30s. They're almost ready to retire. And when they come to New York, I get an opportunity to see them. We have lunch. I go watch the game, and and I do that. So
Great.
it's
Thanks, Tony Giordano. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
Very interesting stuff. I've been wanting to hear the
That was
story,
really-
and now we heard it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.